This is CNN Breaking News.
Well, we have some breaking news for you now from the White House. With fewer than 72 hours left in office, President Obama just granted commutations of sentences to 209 individuals and other pardons. Now, one involves Chelsea Manning. You might remember Chelsea Manning, the Army private who provided sensitive documents to WikiLeaks. Chelsea Manning's sentence has been commuted by President Obama. Let's bring in CNN Justice correspondent Evan Perez. Evan, tell us about this.
This is a bit of a surprise, Jake. Chelsea Manning has served about 7 years of a 35-year sentence, and President Obama has decided to commute that sentence. She will be released in May, according to the White House. Now, this makes a total of 1,385 commutations, 212 pardons, a total of 1,597 acts of clemency by this president, far outpacing his previous presidents from Reagan to Bush to Obama. So this is a big number that President Obama has issued today. 209 commutations, 64 pardons issued today. The big name, obviously, the surprise name is Chelsea Manning, a 35-year sentence now. 7 years is what she has served so far, and she'll be out in May. Another big name on this list today, Jake, is James Cartwright, the retired general, who was accused, or rather he was found guilty of leaking information to journalists, including David Sanger of the New York Times, who wrote a book about the Iranian nuclear program. Cartwright was due to be sentenced later this month, once President Donald Trump had taken office. With the action today, President Obama has made sure that he will not go to jail. The expectation was he was going to serve possibly up to 6 months in jail. He had gotten an outpouring of support from the national security establishment, 38 letters of support, including members of Congress, people inside the government who thought that he was, frankly, should not have gone to prison. And so he has now gotten a pardon. But the big reaction, I suspect, Jake, will be to Chelsea Manning. This is obviously a leak that many in national security circles believe was incredibly damaging. Some people say that she had blood on her hands because of some of the information that was leaked from State Department files. And so the reaction is going to be swift from people there who, in the national security area, who believe that she did not deserve to get out of prison right now. We'll see what the reaction is at this point, but again, that's the surprise announcement from the White House.
That's right. Thank you, Evan Perez. Let's bring in CNN's Michelle Kaczynski at the White House, CNN Justice correspondent Pamela Brown, and CNN's Barbara Starr at the Pentagon. Barbara, let me start with you. Going back to General Cartwright, it's not a huge surprise. The former vice chair of the Joint Chiefs, he pleaded guilty last October to one single charge of making false statements to federal investigators when he was questioned about who provided that information about the efforts to cripple Iran's nuclear program, the Stuxnet program. Not a surprise, really, because of Vice Chair Cartwright's decades of service to our country. But I have to say, I am rather surprised that Chelsea Manning has received a commutation. Just to go back over the charges, one specification of wrongful and wanton publication to the internet of intelligence belonging to the United States, 5 specifications of stealing, purloining, or knowingly converting U.S. government records. It goes on and on and on. Many, many charges. I do not imagine that this is going to be received very well in national security circles, Barbara.
I think that is a very fair assessment, Jake. I think that the fundamental issue now is, will this be seen as a victory for WikiLeaks? And it comes against, of course, the backdrop of WikiLeaks' potential involvement in the Russian hacking of the presidential election. This was many years ago, but it was the first a lot of people heard of WikiLeaks. The information that the U.S. government says Chelsea Manning wrongfully and illegally took turned up in WikiLeaks to a large extent. The Pentagon was absolutely furious. They made every effort to prosecute to the full extent of the law, in no small part to send a signal to others that they cannot do this. Remember, Manning was a relatively low-level Army person at the time and was able really to manipulate the system by downloading classified information out of a larger computer system onto some personal data and then distributing it allegedly to WikiLeaks. So this is going to be something that will be very tough for the military to swallow. They've really tried over the years to make sure there's a law enforcement signal sent, if you will, that leaking and stealing of information and hacking cannot be tolerated. Slightly different, however, with General Cartwright, a well-respected four-star, because behind the scenes, the feeling always was that, to be very clear, it was a feeling that Cartwright was offering this information to U.S. journalists at the behest of the White House, that clearly they wanted to make sure that journalists had a certain amount of information about this Iranian program, and they used Cartwright to do it, and then he basically got caught lying to the FBI about doing it. General Cartwright, in the years that he served, was personally very close to President Obama on a number of policy matters. This is, they say that the big guys escape the jail sentence, the little guys don't in the U.S. military. But in this case, I think many people felt General Cartwright perhaps not totally fairly prosecuted for what he did, that there were extenuating circumstances. I think the problem now is that the release of Chelsea Manning comes against this broader backdrop of WikiLeaks' role in dealing with the American military, the national security community, intelligence. And I think the big question is, how can this be seen other than a potential victory for WikiLeaks? We will have to see what Julian Assange has to say about it all.
That's right. And Michelle Kaczynski at the White House, I'm just looking at a petition here from Amnesty calling for a pardon or commutation for Chelsea Manning. Their argument was that Chelsea Manning was serving the sentence for blowing the whistle on human rights abuses by coalition forces in Iraq, and was over-sentenced as an example to others, and has already served her time. Is that the reason why President Obama is commuting Chelsea Manning's sentence? He essentially bought into that argument?
I mean, it could likely be, and we're going to have to wait to talk to President Obama himself tomorrow. I mean, he's going to give his last press conference. So you see how he did this. He issued these pardons and commutations today, giving the press ample time to question him tomorrow. I mean, he could have done this a day later, and then, it's much more difficult to get at the heart of this. So obviously the White House is willing to shed light on this, to talk about the reasoning. But remember, there was also a big petition that formed for the president to pardon or commute, well, I mean, he hasn't been tried, but Edward Snowden. So you look at these two things side by side. Edward Snowden hasn't come back to the U.S. to face charges, but we have heard the White House weigh in on that case, saying they believe that his leaking hurt national security and that he's never come back to face the charges. Well, by comparison, Chelsea Manning was sentenced to 35 years in prison. So is this a question of scale? Is it a question of who's facing the charges head on and making their argument for doing what they did? Is it the matter of shining light on human rights abuses? Because we know that there have been people within the administration who have talked about leaking in general, in a general sense, saying that, in some ways it helps to shine a light on certain things that would otherwise be secret, and that some maybe feel should not always be secret. So there are arguments to be made there. We've heard some groups make those arguments, and we'll see what the president has to say about it.
All right, Michelle Kaczynski, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about these pardons and commutations and, of course, all the week's politics. Stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.